All right.
Yeah,
Welcome
sorry.
back.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
It's
Slight
okay.
problems there with the audio. But yeah, I'm here now. Welcome everybody back to Hearthstone Global Games 2019. I'm here with Gallant, who just did a fantastic job casting, and I'm more than ready to ruin the fantastic work he's put in. How you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. We were having a little bit of mic issues on both of our ends right there, so we were fed the feed a little bit early. But it's okay. We have South Korea versus Thailand coming up, and we actually have a GM in this match in the form of Dawn playing for South Korea. Game one, it looks like will be Shaman Mirror, so it's going to be pretty exciting. They are both on an Evolved Shaman lineup. One of them actually has a Novice Engineer. We saw that in the previous game in Belgium's. I'm gonna wonder to see how that's gonna play out. But there's actually quite a few interesting inclusions in both of these Evolved Shamans lists. Going through it, South Korea does have a Haunting Visions, and on Thailand's side, they have both a Novice Engineer and a Haunting Visions. Haunting Visions is one of those cards that can bail you out of a really terrible situation. Maybe you need an Earthquake or an additional Lightning Storm, but for the most part, it doesn't really fit into the normal aggressive game plan of an Evolved Shaman. So it's a very weird card in terms of the normal Evolved Shaman dynamic.
Yeah, I've tried Haunting Visions quite a bit myself. I've tried 2, I've tried 1, I've tried 0, obviously, in this version of the Token Shaman. And personally, I found that while the theory behind it makes a lot of sense when you have Spirit of the Frog, you know, obviously you can get a 0-cost spell and then keep cycling through your deck using the power of Haunting Visions. I find that when in practice, when you actually get down to it, it doesn't quite have the right amount of power because you have to play a 3-cost spell first of all, and you don't always get the nice cheap spell you want. Personally, I'm not a fan of it.
Very interesting decision by South Korea already in the mulligan to not keep Spirit of the Frog. We've been talking about that card quite a bit.
That too.
And I'm not sure if I agree with it. I think Spirit of the Frog is one of the most powerful cards in this specific matchup. It's something that lets you fight for board, get tempo without giving your opponent a chance to respond. So they replaced it. They did get a pretty good hand. They got double Mogu, Flesh Shaper, Desert Hair. If they find a single copy of Evolve or another Spirit of the Frog, this hand is going to pan out incredibly well. It just, with this kind of start, you wish that there was a Spirit of Frog in their hand.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever mulliganed Frog on the coin. I'm trying to think if there's any matchups I would do that. Maybe there's some, but definitely not this one. I absolutely want to find Spirit of the Frog as quick as possible because, like you're saying, even if you don't get this kind of hand with the hair and the Mogus, just being able to chain your cheap spells and go for something like Burst, Evolve into Soul of the Murloc is good enough a lot of the time to get a good start.
In fact, both of these teams have a really solid start. Both players here Mogu Flesh Shaper Evolve. Or not Evolve, excuse me. They're missing the Evolve. Whoever finds the Evolve first is probably going to be way ahead. Trying to imagine what Thailand can do here. Haunting Visions for a Farsight sounds like the most optimal thing.
Sure.
Fort Lightning as well could have some implications. If you know exactly what South Korea's hand here is, Plague of Murlocs also is quite powerful. I imagine they have no interest in the Stormbringer, so it comes down to the Fort Lightning and Plague of Murlocs.
Fort Lightning, honestly, I think is, while usually a very, very weak card, with the Thunderhead in hand, going for something like a turn 5 Zap Fort Lightning, I think is probably worth taking here.
I can definitely get behind that. Plague of Murlocs, it's surprising how strong Murlocs actually are. There's a bunch of 4/4s and 3/2s and 2/3s and stuff like that. There is an Evolve. It's quite good.
So what are we thinking here? Do you want to just go for Hair, Coin, Evolve here, lock down the board? Is that good enough to win the game?
I would be a little bit surprised if they go for that. With double Mogu Flesh Shaper in hand, you really want to set up like that power turn where you get 2 8-drops as well. I think without those Mogu Flesh Shapers in hand, the Desert Hair Coin Evolve is always the play. There's still a lot of merit to it. It's just maybe you can set up something like a Coin Thunderhead into a Desert Hair Mogu Flesh Shaper Evolve kind of turn. And that's what they're going to do. I really like it.
With that. Yeah, gets a big juicy minion down, which is still difficult to clear, so is more likely that Mogu will be playable on the following turn.
There's not a clean way to answer this.
So then maybe for Patiel, this is the case of trying to limit minions on the board like completely on this turn. So just equip the Lick Him, take out the 2/1, and then pass. Because obviously then next turn you have a pretty powerful clear turn with Zap and Forked Lightning.
There's also a 2 and 3 that you just could clear it with a Forked Lightning and a Zap with the Lickum, but that's probably way too much of an overextension.
I just felt like at the moment for Batalio that any like development of his own is very lackluster and won't be enough in the game for him.
What could South Korea draw here to activate the Mogu Flesh Shapers again? A Zap would be fantastic, I would say. Spirit of the Frog is also an excellent pickup. Again, they're really not at a point where they can play both Mogu Flesh Shapers. In fact, I think going for a Desert Hare Evolve here is quite weak, just based on the fact that they cannot kill the Thunderhead. So, Spirit of the Frog looks like the play.
Just set up for next turn again?
Yep. Evolve Shaman is a deck that is mostly based around the concept of a swing turn, which is instead of playing for normal tempo, I've actually touched on this a bit yesterday or maybe on Friday. Instead of playing around for a swing turn, or instead of playing like a normal Hearthstone game where they're just fighting for board every single turn, what they try to do is wait for the opponent to commit to something and then counteract it with even more powerful tools. Stuff like Mogu Flesh Shaper, stuff like Sea Giant, board clears like Lightning Storm, for example. But no, they're just going to go for the Evolve here.
Wow, they can take a 5, it's not half bad. But I agree, I'm a little surprised when you have Mogu and a Frog that could cycle you through to a Soul of the Murloc.
That is really surprising. Forked Lightning plus Spirit of the Frog here lets them play a Mogu Flesh Shaper alongside that.
It's true.
If they'd like to.
I wonder.
Yeah, I was trying to wonder if there's any way that you could not overload on this turn to set up for Stormbringer, but that feels pretty much impossible at this point. So, I guess it's just whether you want to play Lick Him or Spirit of the Frog, and I think then you'd probably rather get Frog down.
So far, I don't really like South Korea's approach to this matchup. They have been doing some very powerful tempo-based things, but I think they could have been setting it up just a little bit better.
Yeah.
Mogu Flesh Shaper is so strong in this matchup, especially because the way your opponent wins is by making a big board of like medium-sized things. Very often, Mogu Flesh Shaper will get immediate value against that, because not only does it cost 0, but it also can just get a value trade on most medium-sized things. The fact that they use their Evolve as well means they can't really make the best. They can't take as much advantage of it as possible.
It's such an interesting matchup because I know for a fact I would have played multiple turns on both sides very different from both of these teams. They're playing this quite proactively. But the important thing here is, of course, Thunderhead can be cleared off for Dawn, which is fantastic. If that can think about, that can be where things get a little bit scary.
Electing to just take the Mogu Flesh Shaper value trade, I like it quite a bit. Thailand has not really found the draws in the late game to contest with what South Korea's draws are. South Korea's been getting gas after gas with Thunderhead pickup. They already had 2 Mogu Flesh Shapers in their hand, and they've gotten to use a fantastic Evolve. They're not out of it yet. A Spirit of the Frog here into maybe a Zap off the top could easily find them an Evolve. It cannot die.
Okay. Do we prefer Frog over Hare here? Because I was wondering if you just go Hare, except that one of them's going to die, and then try and go for a double Legendary next turn.
Yeah, I do prefer this. I prefer the Spirit of the Frog here. I think that your game plan is going to start by chaining spells next turn, hopefully getting an Evolve and playing a Desert Hare, zap
Fair enough.
Desert Hare, Evolve into Soul of the Murloc, maybe. If you get a 0-mana spell, you're quite likely to have that. If you get a 0-mana spell into an Evolve, the Evolve guarantees you a Soul of the Murloc.
Sure. I just feel like from my point of view, both teams went for, like you said, they were doing the opposite of what you were talking about in terms of swing turns, right? Like we saw a Hare plus Evolve the turn earlier for Dawn, which meant that these Mogus couldn't be evolved into 8-drops. And then on the other side from Thailand, we saw the decision to go for what I thought was a Thunderhead a turn earlier. I think when you're playing Thunderhead, you want to get a bit more of a swing out of it than that, whereas Lick Him on turn 4 I thought was a, while not astoundingly good play, a perfectly decent one.
You make a lot of good
That's
points.
A good top deck, though.
Evolve is one of the best top decks that guarantees that they can get a Soul of the Murloc for the following turn.
That
Something
makes
to
a
keep
huge
in mind
difference.
is that when you're looking down 7 points of damage, you're in huge range or a huge threat of just dying to a Bloodlust from South Korea here. It could be quite likely that instead of going for a Soul of the Murloc, they should instead be trying to roll for a Taunt Totem.
Okay.
Just something to keep in mind.
I wonder.
Well, I think you can always start with Hare Evolve, right? That's always the first thing that happens.
I like it quite a bit.
Because
If
I
you
would
get-
rather have a 1 in 4 for a Taunt Totem than a random 2-drop here, I think.
I agree with you on that. Desert Hare Evolve could find something huge like a Heckle Bot or an unpowered Steam Bot. If you get one of those, then you're a lot safer. No taunt. They're gonna have to roll for it. They get a taunt totem,
Wow.
but South Korea does have the second Mogu Flesh Shaper, which means they're gonna go up 1-0 in this series with a pretty blistering start, I would say. Double Hare, double Mogu Flesh Shaper, and an Evolve is some of the most powerful cards we have in this matchup. Maybe a little bit of an interesting choice on whether they should have mulliganed the Spirit of the Frog or not, but it didn't seem to matter. They just had gas after gas, threat after threat, and push Thailand out of game 1.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is usually your job because you're much better at the game and therefore see a lot more mistakes than I do. But personally, I feel like that was one of the more mistake-littered games we've seen in global games so far. I personally like, although it's very, very difficult to know the exact right line, and most of their plays probably lead to a win anyway, or are a good enough line. I think there was a lot of made on both sides there to improve their chances in the matchup.
Yeah, minor or major, depending on how you look at it. If you toss away percentage points, some games it won't matter, but some it very much will. So, even in the games where you're very likely to win, you should still try and be playing as optimally as possible. And I definitely agree with you that South Korea could have optimized it a bit better. This is a matchup, though, that we do not see often at all. Very, very rarely do you encounter a Highlander, Paladin, or Mage on ladder, and very, very rarely do you encounter one in a tournament. We get to see both of them here, though.
So I know why we're not seeing much Highlander Paladin on ladder at the moment. There's a lot of Shaman. It's a bad matchup. That would make sense. Why are we not seeing so much Highlander Mage in tournament and on ladder, though? Because in my experience, it's not that bad against Shaman. Like, it's got a decent amount of board clears and can really scale fantastically into the late game.
The reason being is that even though it's decent versus Shaman, it's still a bit unfavored, I would say. Shaman just has so many tools to fight back. One such thing would be a Soul of the Murloc. In some matchups, Soul of the Murloc doesn't seem that punishing, but against specifically Highlander Mage, Soul of the Murloc is such a game-ending bomb. It threatens Bloodlust every single time it comes down, and they really have no way to answer it. Zephyrs generally will offer a single board clear, but then there's still 1/1s left over. And the same goes for something like Reno the Relicologist or even Doomsayer. A lot of times you'll just have so many things left over with a board clear that the Shaman will end up in the late game getting a win with a Bloodlust.
So speaking of Doomsayer here, obviously it's a pretty underwhelming Doomsayer, given that it's only really killing a 1/3 and denying a turn of development. But I was going to say, do you think it's worth it? Because it leads beautifully into a 3-mana play.
Oh, absolutely. You deny so much stuff from Thailand here. Thailand is playing Highlander Paladin, a deck which is trying to fight for board early. Denying them the ability to play their cards pretty much is going to be... Now, Thailand still has a pretty big decision to make here. They could decide to play a Sir Finley of the Sands, upgrade their hero power. Yeah, they do lose the 2-3, but they also get that mana spent on upgrading their hero power. And for me, personally, I think it's quite worth it to do such a thing.
Okay.
Move quickly.
I guess, yeah. I mean, my thinking was, when I was going through that, is you're probably not going to be using your hero power much in the next few turns. Is that, like, not enough of an incentive to keep the 2-3 just as a better body on board?
There's a lot of, what's the word for it? There's a lot of decisions that are going to be made throughout the game that factor into that. One of them being, on the turn where you would use your hero power, maybe you need to spend 6 mana on something else. Maybe the first turn you use it is turn 7, turn 8, and committing the extra 2 mana necessary to play the Sir Finley on that turn ruins your game plan. I don't think an extra 2-3 in hand for 2 mana, a River Crocodilus, is really what Highlander Paladin needs to secure this matchup, so I do like them just getting it out of the way.
Okay, fair enough. So, Suna here obviously wondering, am I allowed to play out the Flame Waker? It's clearly the stronger play, the higher tempo play, and while it is vulnerable to True Silver, it's only really vulnerable to 1 card in a Highlander deck, so I don't hate them just tempoing it out here.
Yeah, I quite like it. If they go coin True Silver Champion as well, you have to remember that using that coin means so many of the late game threats like Ragnaros, Siamat, even something like a Mysterious Challenger on turn 5 can no longer come down. Pretty important question here. Would you go something like Snip Snap Coin Redemption? It's one of the few minions that gets actively good with that specific secret.
I mean, it is actively good with that secret, but as you just said, that means you're not going Coin Challenger on 5, which sounds bad.
This is pretty cool. They just do I would say almost do the exact same thing here by using the hero power. Worried about
playing
noble
around
sacrifice.
Noble sacrifice. Oh.
Getting a 3-2 was pretty unfortunate for them. They could just be pinged off with the
yes. Yeah.
It's going to be pretty funny to see what's happening this game. I imagine that Thailand is just going to take a much more control approach with their hero power because they can get so much value out of it over the next couple turns. So we see that Sir Finley on 2 come back directly to benefit them immediately afterwards. They've gotten so much value already out of playing that Finley into the Doomsayer. It's pretty cool to see.
Sea Giant, as I always forget, not an elemental, and therefore could not be cheated out any earlier with the elemental evocation. So I suppose outside of that, because this is kind of an underwhelming Conjurer's Calling, it's probably just going to be a wind up with Arcade Intellect for a stronger Emperor next turn.
Mana Cyclone picked up. That's pretty huge. They do have an elemental invocation in hand. Right now they would only get 2 spells. So I imagine from their perspective, it might not be worth it. Like you're saying that...
This is something... Sorry, I just thought I should bring this up now. Second Sea Giant made me look at the list. It's not even Reno Mage.
It's Cyclone Mage, yeah.
It's Cyclone Mage. Huh, that's pretty interesting. What do you know?
Time runs out on me.
Definitely interested in holding on to that mirror image. You can reduce its cost with the Emperor Tharasan, and then later on play a 0 mana mirror image to reduce the cost of Sea Giants by 2 mana apiece. Thailand can once again just play the control route, snip snap, ping if they'd like to, into a Mysterious Challenger, into a Tyrion.
That looks pretty good to me, right? The hero power works out gorgeously here.
Alternatively, they could just play 2 snip snaps. Alternatively, they could just play a Mysterious Challenger. Why not? That's also pretty powerful.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Suni could take this turn to say, you know, even though this was technically a very powerful turn because of all the secrets, the actual amount of stats that were put on board were not that high quite yet, so it could just be Emperor Pass to set up for a stronger play next turn.
I really like Emperor Pass here, and I imagine they're going for a polymorph here instead. Proc the Avenge, get rid of some of the secrets, but I really do like your suggestion of an Emperor Thaurissan. They have a Frost Nova, Conjurer's Calling, and lots of huge minions to play, so even though this is a pretty good job of fighting off the Mysterious Challenger, it doesn't really accomplish their game plan very well. Remember that Emperor Thaurissan landing is like an extra 8 mana or 7 mana worth of progression towards their game.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I preferred that quite a bit.
The line that they managed to take, though, this is pretty convincing. Playing around the Never Surrender, getting rid of the Avenge.
Because of Patiao's choice to go for the Mysterious Challenger last turn, we are of course looking at a significantly weaker play on this turn. And to be fair to Suni, his line was pretty good against Snip Snap. You know, he cleared off the mech so that no magnetization was available.
Let me think.
Yep. I'd be hard pressed to see Thailand do anything but double Snip Snap this turn and trade off the 3-1. I think splitting them up makes a lot of sense, like they're doing right now. Having it as a 4-6 often can get punished by a simple freeze effect.
Alright, a little late, but still, Emperor hits the board and is able to massively reduce his hand. Because as I'm currently seeing it, Suni's best chance of winning this game looks like one huge push onto the board with Sea Giants and Conjurers.
That is a huge
that
draw.
Might put an end. That is
Of the South, come to my aid.
Just going to take the time to clear off for Thaurissan. A ton of sense. Leading directly into a Tyrion or a Zephyrus. Bloodlust if necessary. If South Korea wants, they can load up the entire board. Mirror Image, Double Sea Giant, Ray of Frost, Ray of Frost. Only problem with that is it will proc a Hidden Wisdom, drawing 2 cards for Thailand. It also leaves themselves a little bit vulnerable to the Zephyrus that we actually see is in Thailand's hand right now.
Yeah, I think Zephyrus is the real problem with this play, but honestly, I think it's correct for Suni to start going all in here, because it's either, you know, it's the classic thing in Hearthstone, do you lose quicker or lose slower? And I think if they have the Zephyrus, this loses pretty quickly, but it's still probably the best line.
The lists that we're seeing are so interesting. It's pretty uncommon to see like a mech base
Runs out on me.
Highlander Paladin. I feel like that has been a little bit retired, especially War Gear. You don't really see it that often anymore.
Okay, just trying to protect this board as much as possible. Is Suni here? So for Patiao, as a baseline play that I'm seeing, Ping, Zephyrus, Shadow Flame clears off the entire board for Patiao, just sacrificing the 6-6. Wow.
I definitely like the Tyrion instead. It's just
Just
the
wants to
biggest
develop.
thing. Yeah, keep on developing. Make the Zephyrus kill the opponent instead of play reactively. Because this pretty much accomplishes the same thing, right?
I mean, yes and no, right? It gives your opponent the turn to do their disgusting stuff in response to try and clear the board, but
Sure.
I can see how this is better.
Flame Elemental, the
Well,
6/6.
that's one very good and one very bad generation there off of the Astral Rift.
They can still load up on the board. I imagine they're at a point now where if Zephyrus is in the hand of the Highlander Paladin, they're just dead, so playing around it doesn't make too much sense to me.
Agreed.
Flame Elemental can hit the Divine Shield on the 6/6 on Tyrion. You get to play a Sea Giant alongside that, and Ray of Frost the Siamat.
That's definitely what I'm seeing. So this allows Frost Nova as well. This was much worse.
You didn't develop a Fire Elemental, and you developed an O3 instead. Like, you're still losing to a Zephyrus here.
Right, exactly. If their board gets cleared, it doesn't matter. Fire Ellie's not winning them the game.
Yeah, exactly. I am in agreement with you. There could be a 6/5 in play instead of a 0/3 in play right now. Either way, it would not have mattered. Zephyrus is probably going to come down very soon and lock out the game for the Highlander Paladin here. But I do agree with you in these kinds of games, you really need to be pushing your advantage as much as possible. It didn't feel like South Korea did that.
Patiao looks like he's found a way to not have to play the Zephyrus, which, if you can find that, brilliant. It's usually a better line of play.
Ziliax and War Gear both work. You can hit the 5/3, trade a Snip Snap into the 8/6. Ziliax, one of the 1/1s that spawn out of it.
Sure.
Move quickly.
There's a bit of merit to doing it on the actual Snip Snap, but I like splitting up threats like they're doing here.
Yep.
Excellent play by Thailand. Great sequencing, recognizing not to use the Zephyrus, just use the weaker tools to accomplish the same thing. So yes, South Korea gets to use their Fire Elemental for lots of value, and it will not matter. They're still...
Thank God they saved it. Whew.
Pharaoh's Blessing, Zephyrus, Wind Fury is way more than enough to lock out this game.
Alright, there we go.
Patio will lock it up to 1-1 for Thailand against South Korea going into game number 3.
Very impressive display here from the Paladin here, which has definitely been, as we keep saying, underrepresented. It's kind of difficult to line up around it because you have to bear in mind that, of course, this deck is very weak to Shaman. In my experience, it's pretty weak to Priest as well, just these very aggressive early game plays. But we're seeing against some of these slightly slower decks, it's looking very strong.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the problem with bringing it to this tournament is not the fact that it's very good versus these slower decks that we see a little bit of. It's the fact that the two best decks in the format, Priest and Shaman, both kind of dumpstered, I would say. Yeah. So yeah, it's a powerful deck. I just don't think this is like the current meta where it's going to be at its strongest. Maybe in the future it could still be around if, Evolve Shaman. Evolve is going to be leaving standard soon. Maybe Northshire Cleric gets bumped up to 2 mana. That could happen. And we start seeing a lot more Highlander Paladin. But definitely in these slower style of matchups, that's where it shines. It's been really good versus Warrior this weekend. Just showed that it's amazing versus Mage as well. Love to see more of it throughout this tournament.
I think I've frozen.
You're back.
Oh, no, wait, I'm back.
Yeah.
There we go. Hello. Sorry, I was stuck in a rift in time for a second. But I'm back just in time to warn you all of an incoming doom, which is a 3-minute break. And we'll be right back after said break. Welcome back, everybody. You're watching Hearthstone Global Games 2019, where we are almost done with the top 32. It's our final day here before we find out all of our 16 countries that will be fighting out next week for their spot in the final week, which will be happening just before Christmas, around the end of December, for their fighting the chance of $75,000 worth of money. Before they get there, we got to be getting on with this series first. This is the initial match of Group B, South Korea, with Suni and Dawn versus Dizdai and Patio on Thailand. And you and I were just saying in the break that I think, contrary to what people expect, it feels like Thailand has been playing a bit better so far.
Yeah, Dawn, who's playing for South Korea, is in the Asia Pacific Grandmasters League. But I do agree with you that Patio and Dizdai, I think, are showing their stuff in this series compared to the South Koreans. Game 1 was a bit sloppy for South Korea, even though they did end up winning that series off of the back of some very powerful Mogu Flesh Shapers and gas like Thunderheads. But Game 2, it really looked like Thailand understood the matchup at a not much higher level, but a significantly higher level than the South Korean team.
Agreed. And now we are jumping back into the Shaman action. And while Suni and the South Koreans may have not realized the power of Spirit of the Frog at that point, I'm sure they're about to, with Patio having 2 of those bad boys ready to go.
Spirit of the Frog is one of the most interesting cards in the game right now, because on the surface it looks kind of like a control style card. You know,
Yes.
Oh, I just want to draw some spells. Okay, I'm going to cast Lightning Storm and get a Hex. But people, as soon as Evolve got added to the mix, people started realizing, hey, wait a second, I can just zap for an Evolve and win the game immediately. So we should be doing that instead of trying to play these prolonged, weird Control Shaman style of games. I remember, I believe it was in might have been season 1, but I'm pretty sure it was season 2. We saw Viper bring a lot of very weird Control Shaman style decks to the European Grandmasters with Spirit of the Frog as a draw engine. And it did not work out that often. So this new style of aggressive use of the Spirit of the Frog, I think, is much more powerful.
This is what makes me sad about the power level of Shaman at the moment, because I genuinely think that Shaman is one of the most interesting classes at the moment in terms of all the options it has available to it, the style of play that you can go for with the different archetypes. It's just because it's so toxic with the Evolve and the Hares and the Mogus and all that nonsense that you're kind of forced into playing this one play style, even though in my opinion it's actually just a very diverse class of them.
Yep, there's a lot going on. Even among Evolved Shamans themselves, like, the deck list has so much refinement and tech cards that you can add to it. We even see in this matchup right now, if you look at Patoyo's deck, there is a Novice Engineer and a Haunting Visions, which are both very weird cards, at least in my eyes, for what an Evolved Shaman wants to do. However, at the same time, I do agree with you that the overwhelming power of certain hands the Shaman can muster, like Mogu Flesh Shaper, Desert Hare Evolve, can be a little bit frustrating to play against, but it's also kind of one of the reasons people play this deck, you know? People like having scenarios where they always win.
Yeah. Very interesting play here that we're seeing from Tariel and Tyler, in that it is Frog and the spells on the same turn. It's surprisingly rare that you see Frog, Coin, spells all on the same turn, but here it feels honestly like probably the right play. It draws through the deck, cycles through a lot of stuff, and also means the Frog has no danger of dying to the random effects from the Flamewaker.
Yeah, that's definitely the big one. The factor that you mentioned at the very end there, killing off the Flamewaker immediately, protecting the Spirit of the Frog, makes a lot of sense, even though it delays other parts of your game plan by quite a bit.
I wonder.
South Korea debating whether they play a Khadgar this turn, or even just play a 2/2 Mana Cyclone. I really would...
It's got to just be passed, right?
Yes, I would like to see a pass here, especially with an Emperor Tharsen in hand, reducing the cost of both Khadgar and Conjure's Calling.
Yeah. Big time. Right, so Pattaya does have the option to just go for Burst Evolve on this turn, you know, to get a little bit of board presence rolling right out the gate. I think that's probably a little bit needlessly aggressive, though.
At the
something a
same
bit more powerful.
At the same time, however, it would be coming down a turn before a Reno... Oh, you know what? I keep on saying Reno the Right. They are not playing Reno Mage. So while it could come down a turn before Reno, I kind of like just playing Voltaic Burst Evolve this turn. Get something on board, play for tempo. You've seen a Flame Waker. And more often than not, doesn't die. You summon a 4-drop and 2/2 drops.
So I guess the thing is, right, it makes your Thunderhead obviously a lot worse because you're playing the one Overload card in your hand. But I suppose the response to that could be you don't need to get a strong Thunderhead because you'll have minions on board, which runs into Vicina perfectly next turn.
Yeah, exactly. You lose out on the Thunderhead value, but your Vicina becomes so much stronger.
That's fair enough. Honestly, I think both lines. I'm not actually sure which one's better. Especially as, you know, against a reactive of a deck, a Cyclone Mage, you don't really want to have stuff on the board proactively. You see what I mean? You want to have, like, potential in your hand to react to that stuff.
Absolutely. I definitely would not fault them for just going Totem Pass here. It was not a... And in fact, they get immediately rewarded with a Desert Hare picked up off the top for this evolve. But no, I definitely would not fault them. I don't think it's contentious in the way that... It's not contentious in the way that one way is strictly right and one way is strictly wrong. The percentages, it would be like 51-49 in one way or the other.
Yeah. It's like, who is a better caster out of Gallon or Darek? Like, saying Gallon is not strictly wrong, necessarily, but, you know, it's like 50% wrong.
I wonder.
I'm going to get you back to that. Not right now. We got
Just
a
let
game
me know
to
when you
cast,
think of
but
comeback.
I'm going to get you back to that.
Alright, Hair Evolve, the infamous combo. Name a more iconic duo. Oh, okay. Well, okay, name a more iconic duo that evolve into a bunch of garbage.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
But that does give the necessary breathing room to Suni to, I would have to imagine, play the Emperor Thaurissan, right? He's got a big full hand, he needs to start making something happen, and this feels like the time to do it.
Emperor Thaurissan, trade off the Twilight Drake.
What to do?
It's got to be the play, right?
Obviously it
Doesn't
can
have-
die, but you don't care. Like, if they have to trade both their 4-drops into that, tick, 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 fantastic.
It's reducing currently 7 cards in hand. Technically, the Elemental Evocation gets hit, but it's already 0 mana card, so 0 minus 1 is still 0, according to Hearthstone rules. It's kind of like how 4 equals infinity.
What a throwback. One person in chat's gonna love that reference.
Oh, yeah. The people that have watched more than a single game of Hearthstone. I would never.
Right, how much mana can we cheat out here as the Shaman? Voltaic Burst brings the Giant down to 4, which means both Giants are not playable on this turn, sadly. I guess maybe try and just get one down then? Like, Burst, Hero Power, Sea Giant?
I have some interest in playing Vicina this turn alongside the Voltaic Burst. Seems like a really powerful turn to do something.
Sure, yeah.
You get to just clear the Emperor Thaurissan immediately with the 2 rushing sparks, and you get to push an extra 6 damage. Suddenly your board is actually quite threatening.
My thinking with Giant is if you go, like, if you were to go Burst plus Giant, or even, like, potentially just play Giant and then trade in 2 minions, it means you have a big guy and the board is small, so their Sea Giant becomes a lot worse. I think I like this line.
You can always make use.
You still have the
Vicina
possibility for
Voltaic
next
Burst.
turn Vicina, Voltaic Burst plus Soul of the Murloc to make a big board and get a lot of burst damage.
Yep. And like we were saying, Soul of the Murloc is quite powerful versus Mage. We were talking about it in terms of Highlander Mage, but even against Cyclone Mage, it has quite a lot of applications.
I wonder.
Just playing a Sea Giant of their own. Does make sense. Trying to set up for that Khadgar's Conjure's Calling before we turn.
Yeah, I think that's very smart.
And like you were
Shaman
saying,
does not have many ways to deal with this.
Vicina Voltaic Burst plus the Soul of the Murloc can just clear this off. If Thailand decides to take a defensive route this game, they are looking pretty solid.
I've really liked Thailand's approach to this game. Like there's some games that you play well because they're easy to play, but you've brought up lots of like very, very valid alternate lines that I think are really close. But actually, Pacquiao's lines, in my opinion, it's like they're difficult to find, but they're just about the best approach.
Out of the 14 million possible futures, they found the one where the Sea Giant dies.
Nice. I guess Sea Giant looks a little bit like Thanos, like a green Thanos. Well, I suppose
Something
that
like that.
market's already filled by Shrek.
They're the same character. Astral Rift can find a Zephyrus, but wait, they are no longer a Highlander mage. Feels bad, man. Maybe a Cyclone off of one of these Astral Rifts. You can Elemental Evocation it out, get a Frost Nova.
I mean, it's probably Giant, right, is what they're looking for, like Mountain Giant, and then cheat it out with the Evocation.
Yes, yes. A Mountain Giant here. Well, even a Mountain Giant, could they cast it? I'm counting 9 cards in their hand.
They go Evocation Giant for 3, and then Conjurer's Calling.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about Khadgar Conjurer's Calling as a way to actually stay alive.
Oh, okay. Sure, I mean, yes, that would be ideal, but I don't think that's quite playable yet.
Time runs out on me.
Actually, no, that's not true. Go. Oh no, sorry.
If
I was
this
gonna say
was
you could go Astral Rift, but that doesn't add mana.
Frost Nova is huge here. Maybe the Flame Ward is just better. It protects you a bit more, I would say. You want to save this Frost Nova. You're not likely to die this upcoming turn. And because of that, you want to save the Frost Nova for a later turn. Use the weaker tool now, save the stronger tool for later.
And what this now means, Suni, through saving the Frost Nova, has that one last turn where maybe he can cheat out enough mana, freeze the board to go for a cheesy kill.
I would love to see a Bloodlust come down this turn. Even though it does not lead to an immediate kill due to the Flame Ward, it's still just so much damage. Am I wrong? No, I'm not wrong. Okay. For some reason I thought it said 17 instead of 13. That'd be a very high number. Alright, it's time to pop off.
Okay, that's a big top deck.
Mirror Image first, then Khadgar. Does that work? You get it down to 3?
Image, then Khadgar, gets it down to 3, and then you... Well, the thing is, like, you want to play Frost Nova on the same turn.
It doesn't quite work. Wait, does it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe he needs
if you go
Khadgar
Khadgar
first.
Images, you only
Then
get 2 10 drops, but I think you might have to take that.
Yeah, and because then you can go Conjurer's Calling Frost Nova.
Yeah. Whoa.
Does this add more stuff to the board? He could load up the opponent's board here.
I mean, yes, it does, right? Because there's 2 1/1s that come out of it as well.
Would you Khadgar first in that instance to double the amount that it gets summoned?
But you probably should, right? Oh, it
No,
goes
this
full
one.
anyway.
Oh yeah. Okay. For some reason, I believe that there were.
Ah!
We must band together.
Okay, this is good. This is perfectly good.
I'm a little bit confused. I think that their general game plan and approach this turn was right, but maybe there was a better way of doing that. They could have spent 2 mana on the Khadgar Mirror Images.
Yeah.
They have 8 mana remaining. Sea Giant would cost 0, and they can go Sea Giant, Conjurer's Calling the Sea Giant, and then just Frost Nova. I understand that they're worried about minions being played, but at the same time, you have 4 taunts in the way.
They would have only got 2 10 drops.
Yeah, but maybe...
I guess that's good enough.
Earthshock. Earthshock plus...
That's
You
lethal,
Earthshock
right?
one of your own minions, you can zap. Is it lethal?
No, not quite. Sorry, not quite.
No, it is, because they can have Are there 7 minions in play?
I wonder.
There's 7 minions in play, yeah.
7 minions in play?
Yeah, I don't think it's quite lethal. If they Earth Shock, Zap, no.
There's little time.
There's no way of doing it, right?
No. Okay, sure. Alright, they just gotta hope that they're able to get the attacks through on the following turn. Whoa.
I'm a little bit confused. Magic for Frost Nova is one way to stay alive in this game.
Or a lot of living monuments.
Yeah, that works as well. You need...
I mean, the Zap that came down also makes you wonder about playing the Khadgar at all. That was arguably a mistake, because it means they can't get more 10 drops this turn. That's a pretty big discover there.
Quite huge. They get to do a lot of stuff this turn. Elemental Evocation will allow them to get at least 2 more pings than normal.
Ooh.
I am very...
This is close, man. This is really close.
Conjur's calling on an 8-5? Get some living
Well,
monuments?
they have to kill... The 1/1 has to die or that's game over.
They could get living monument in here. That's just game.
That's GG.
Bloodlust is gonna come down, zap the O2, deal 4 to South Korea's very fragile face.
Yes, Earthshock. Correct, Earthshock.
Earthshock,
Do it.
Earthshock. I
Take the win.
apologize.
There we go.
Yes, yes. That works as
I mean,
well. Why not? Yes.
However you want to do it. Alright, there we go.
Next we play games by Thailand here, especially to tell you I like spotting of that. I wonder if there was something South Korea could have done in that specific game. There's so many decisions to be made with how they used Khadgar, how they used their mirror images, and even how they used their Sea Giant Conjurers calling. So very confusing. At the end there, though, I do think there's maybe a better way of getting more stuff in play to contest, if that's the route that they wanted to go for. You know, at the very end, we saw them use Flame Waker plus a lot of pings to try to deal with the board, but it just wasn't enough. Maybe that one extra 8-drop in play, or 10-drop in play, could have dealt with it more effectively.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of minor optimizations. Like the big standard one that's not too complicated is I think just playing the Khadgar at all. I think you could definitely argue that should have been held back because it wasn't doing anything immediately, and they probably have 1 mana spare on the following turn to go for it anyway. And then you can get into the really complicated stuff, like, you know, should they have gone for the Conjurer's Calling on the opposing minion? Was there any way they could have sequenced it better? It was a very tough turn, but like you said, I'm sure there were minor optimizations that could have been made.
This matchup, I can tell you from my experience playing it, is horrendous for the Highlander Mage. One of the things that...
Not Highlander.
Or even Cyclone Mage. I think it's horrendous for Cyclone Mage as well. The reason being, you just can't kill a Quest Druid with 25 damage. And
It's
Cyclone Mage
impossible.
is really good at killing people with 25 damage with their Flame Waker, but when Druid is still at 30 health afterwards and you have nothing left over, you're going to be in for a bad time. Not only
Alright,
that...
so... Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, not only that, one of the things that Druid really excels at is fighting in the mid-game, and Highlander Mage is kind of like a budget form of Druid at fighting at the mid-game. They do have Mountain Giants, they have some interesting plays to be made with Conjurer's Calling, but when you're summoning 2 random 4-drops and your opponent's playing an Oasis Surger, most of the time you're coming out of that exchange very far behind.
Alright, so in that case, if we're talking about Flame Wakers and all that nonsense, the damage not getting there, fine. Let's discard that game plan for the moment. What about abusing Sea Giants, Khadgar, Conjurer's Calling, Frost Nova, and just cheesing out a win with a bunch of 10 and 12?
I definitely think that is a better game plan, but there's a couple of factors, especially in this specific game, that are at the detriment of the Mage. One being, Quest Druid is on the coin. Cyclone Mage gets a lot worse when it is no longer on the coin. It can no longer power out Mana Cyclone as effectively. Mountain Giant just costs 2 extra every single time. And another thing about that is that Quest Druid gets to power out their quest 1 turn earlier. When Quest Druid has its quest online, it's casting Oasis Surger, it's casting Nourish. Suddenly, the Mage will be so far behind, or even if they get these huge board states with Sea Giant Conjurer's Calling, it's just not enough to get over the line.
And the problem, of course, as well, is that it's not like Mage is playing Solitaire over there, where they're able to ignore the Druid and complete their own game plan for as long as they want. The Druid's going to start smacking you very, very quickly, and Mage has to use a lot of its combo pieces just to stay alive.
Absolutely right. Thailand would overdraw a card here if they elect to go for a Innervate Nourish.
Probably worth it, though.
But yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's probably worth doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
The only alternative I can see with any merit would... Sorry to interrupt you. The only alternative I can see with any merit would be like Loti and then charge in to turn the Floop into Loti, but that seems quite a lot worse.
Wouldn't be surprised to see them discard this Anubisat Defender. Kuhn the Forgotten King picked up.
Wow.
Yeah, you pretty much always take that one.
Time waits for no one.
Hey.
Thailand making some fantastic decisions so far. I think they have a very powerful start, but they're also playing it quite well, I would say. 10 cards in hand for the Cyclomage, and they all do absolutely nothing.
I wonder.
I mean, you gotta start by drawing, right? So you play the Doomsayer and then draw? That doesn't sound good.
Nothing sounds particularly good here.
Like, okay, is Flamewaker even that valuable? Could you just play Flamewaker and
Time runs out on me.
I mean, you're back in the same spot where, you know, you're pretty much cycling your turn away. You're going to give Quest Druid 8 more mana to play with while you do absolutely nothing. And I mean, that's what they have.
The real problem is though, they just overdraw a card here anyway. So
Yeah.
it basically does nothing. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. I feel like, you know, even without that mistake, like, nothing really matters.
I wouldn't even call it a mistake. It doesn't. It's just they have no way of contesting it. This is what happens when Quest Druid gets its quest online. It's why the matchup is so horrendous for the Cyclone Mage and Highlander Mage as well. It's just they really cannot contest the power of what Druid brings to the table in the mid game. Yep.
I wonder.
Another mage turn, another one that really does not make that much sense. Last ditch effort, Flamewaker, Magic Trick, gonna try to find a elemental evocation for their Mana Cyclone. Maybe they can get some form of pressure going, but again, Druid's already at over 40 life right now. They have a ton of ways.
I mean, the real
answer.
problem was just that they didn't find the Mountain Giants, right? That's what you need, I feel like, in this matchup to have a chance.
Yes and no. I think a Mountain Giant would have helped, but it would not have been nearly enough to secure this game.
It would have given them a chance, though, I feel like. Oh,
Maybe.
You know, something to talk about, Gallon.
Time runs out on me.
Yeah,
You're looking at Astral Rift because maybe it does something. They didn't even clear off the Oasis Surgers. Yep, you got one more turn before the Coons start coming down.
How does floaty Starfall sound.
It sounds fantastic, Derek. Just say 2 cards in their hand. How does Starfall Wrath sound? Oh, it sounds fantastic. Elise Wrath. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, that probably wins.
Elise Wrath, your own Elise, probably wins at this point.
Alright, bottom right, and then the little red button that says concede.
No, okay,
That's
no,
the one
not-
play I'm seeing that doesn't win.
Yeah, not that one. I'd like to see them keep the Flippiness Loop in hand, but it wouldn't really matter. You get an extra boon if you save it, but it doesn't matter. Just play 2 5 6. Why not?
Nice!
They played
Yeah, that's
2
probably actually the
cards.
best play. You'd want to keep the pressure up.
They played 2 cards from their hand, and it was really good.
Yeah. Excellent play. And this really does feel like, for me, you know, even though we've disagreed with a few of the plays from South Korea along the way, the real egregious fact, to me, feels like bringing this deck at all. Like, what were they trying to target with this deck that they didn't find?
That's a really good question, and I'm gonna say most likely combo priest. That's really what this deck wants to place. Maybe Shirvala Paladin. Maybe they expected people to play with the new Sathrovar card, which has found a home in Holy Wrath Paladin. But yeah, I just have to agree with you. Highlander Mage is not a powerful deck. Quest Druid, Rogue, Shaman. Yeah, sorry, Cyclone Mage. Especially Cyclone Mage. It's not even Highlander Mage. It doesn't have the power level of Reno the Relicologist to save it sometimes, or Zephyrus. You know, Quest Druid, Warrior, Evolve Shaman, Priest, Rogue, even Highlander Paladin by a bit, all just sound like much more powerful decks for this kind of tournament. Yep. Big stuff in play.
Alright, Frost Nova buys a turn for Suni. Maybe then something could happen. Conjurer's Calling, that's a card. Alright, let's go.
They can go Khadgar.
This is a
Sea Giant.
powerful turn.
I will agree with you. This is a powerful turn.
This is a crazy powerful turn.
Don't play Arcane Intellect. You're going Sea
No.
Giant, Conjurer's Calling, Sea Giant, Frost Nova, and then you're ending your turn as quickly as possible.
Yes, that sounds much better to me. Whoa! Alright, we've got a win con.
Our power is in our.
You know how much damage is in play right now, Derek?
A lot.
40. You know how much life Druid has? 52.
Even if there were no taunts, it's still not even lethal.
They could just pass this turn and still win the game.
That's good banter. Okay, Wrath Starfall. What does that do?
I imagine
Probably
Wardru
wins
Lodi
the
can
game.
come out here. Wardru Lodi can swing into a 10-10.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that makes sense to me, yeah.
You can Starfall 5-5 or an 8-8. Doesn't really matter. The Wrath deals 6. Starfall deals either 8 or 3. So no matter what, you can't clear both 10-10s if you'd like. You can, it's just not a good use of your resources, in my opinion.
Oh my god. Druid's supposed to be bad at this. Like, clearing big boards of giant things is supposed to be Druid's weakness. And yet here we are.
Yeah, there was a time when Naturalize was considered the most powerful thing. Answer a single minion. Now we just have 6 damage Ras and a 3-mana Poisonous Rush.
Naturalize was disgusting. Fair.
Oh yeah. Oh, it would be incredibly broken right now with Elise and Baleful Banker. Can you imagine? You just have 10 Naturalizes at the end of it?
That would actually be disgusting. Yeah, good luck with that. All right, should we start with the draw? I guess you want to trade first.
What to do? What to do?
You probably want a Conjurer's Calling here. Maybe... No. I'm just trying to think of worlds where you ever win. I think from South Korea's perspective, they can't even Conjurer's Calling here. It's more important to get a board freeze.
Time runs out on me.
I agree.
But I might have liked to see that before drawing the card, because maybe then you could go Conjurer's Calling plus something.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, even double limit, I think this is safe.
And it's not even close, no. That's going to do it.
You win.
And that's going to do it. A 3-0 sweep against the Mage here. It was a bit of a disaster for them, to be honest. And we're seeing why not many players are going with the Cyclone Mage, all things considered. Especially when we even agreed that I think some of their play felt suboptimal with the lines they were taking.
Yeah, it's a bit interesting because the one game that we heavily disagreed with how they were approaching it, it would not have mattered. They still would have lost. It was just getting into the habit of playing well in every single turn, even if when it doesn't matter, will often help you. You know, sometimes it does. And there was another game where the sequencing on whether they get the Khadgar plus Sea Giant plus Conjurer's Calling was correct. Maybe they could have gotten more taunts after mirror images. Maybe they could have gotten extra damage down a little bit earlier to contest the board. But yeah, I have to agree with you. I think Thailand played that series pretty fantastically, besides maybe game one. But throughout the rest of the series, they showed a very dominant performance versus Mage. I'm sure they've been practicing that matchup a lot because the way they've been playing definitely highlights that, I would say.
I definitely agree with you there. Very strong play with everything outside of the Shaman Mirror, which is a bit of a strange beast, but I agree, could have been optimized slightly. That does mean, though, that we have Thailand moving on in the upper bracket of the group. Sadly, South Korea are dropping down to the losers bracket, where we are going to find out who they will be facing out of China and New Zealand, I believe, as the other two players in the group. Two players who did very well last year. We obviously have quarterfinalists and the champions in China from last year, so you're not going to want to miss them. We'll be right back after this quick break.